The committee meeting is a public session and will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and anyone who is in the public gallery is required to follow the rules of the committee. At this stage, members are going to take apologies, which we have from Mr Beattie, Mr Buckley and Ms Eastwood. Declarations of interest, members, if any. Not seeing any in the room nor online, so we'll move on then to Chairperson's business. Members, it is usual prior to summer recess to agree to delegate authority to the Chair and Deputy Chair to submit views on the releasing or withholding of information in any routine or contentious freedom of information request received by the committee. The clerk has advised me that he has not previously received such, but it is normal practice that the committee does agree to delegate that authority to the Chair and Deputy Chair. Though obviously if there are any, I will keep members informed. Are members content with that? Yeah, thank you. Draft minutes, and can I also thank Ms McLaughlin for stepping in for me on Tuesday to represent the views of the committee. Thank you very much for doing that, Sinead. For then members is draft minutes. If you look at page 7 of your pack, you'll find a copy of the draft minutes from our deliberations on the 19th of June. Are members content that these are a true and accurate reflection of our discussions and are happy for me to sign them as such? Content. Thank you. Number 5 then, members, is matters arising. There are no matters arising and the committee will proceed down through the agenda. Are members agreed? Thank you. At this stage then, members, we will invite our Minister. Good morning, Minister. How are you? You're looking very happy this morning, Minister.
I'm always happy to see you, Chair. Always happy to see you. I'm happy that you're in here and not out canvassing in North Belfast.
We've already got it one. Good morning, Minister. You are very welcome. And
thank you very much.
Need no introduction to the committee. Mr. Ian Snowden, members will be aware. I think is now the permanent secretary since his last appearance here. So, Ian, on behalf of myself and in the committee in particular, we're delighted at your appointment. You're a stellar civil servant, and we're delighted to have you in the department on a permanent basis. So, congratulations on that, Minister. We are delighted that you have come along for your second appearance at the committee. You made clear to me at the start that you'd be free and available to the committee at all times, and you have honoured that. So, thank you very much for that. And with that, Minister, I'm very content to hand over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and thanks for the invitation just to give an update on the progress that we've made across a range of issues since I last appeared here on the 20th of March. When set out my own economic strategy at that time, identified the problems of our low employment rate, our low productivity, low wages and severe regional imbalances as some of the big challenges that we faced. These problems have deep roots, and many of the levers that are needed to address them rest in Westminster. But with the right approach, it was my clear view coming into the department that we could turn the dial on some of these things. So I was determined to provide a strategic focus, which was I felt was much needed, by setting 4 key objectives, which you'd be familiar with. The key objectives: good jobs, regional balance, and productivity, and net zero. Overarching theme, I suppose, in relation to all of those, and they're all interlinked, is the issue of skills. And that I think our ability to deliver on all of these things will be underpinned by improving skills and by improving accessibility of people to work and to learning. And I've tasked my officials with developing a 3-year skills plan, and I'll hopefully soon be in a position to outline this plan in the very near future. The department's key delivery arm, as you again and the committee will be very much aware, Invest NI, was subject to significant reform on the back of a very critical report. And its ability to be in the shape to work on these objectives is going to be vital. So I have discussed with the Chief Executive, the Board and the Chair on the need for Invest NI to have a much stronger role in supporting regional balance, and it is in the process of finalising plans to restructure on the back of the Lyons report into it. And reversing the drop in number of people attending colleges is also critical. My first priority in coming into office was to ensure that the adequate budget was in place to provide suitable pay offer for lecturers who perform obviously a very vital role in the colleges, and in turn the colleges themselves playing a vital role in that overarching priority was about people and skills. So we were pleased to get that issue resolved. We're aiming to increase the number of students going to university, and in particular determined to see the expansion of the Magee campus, but people will know, without me having to outline the financial constraints that we're operating within here. Nonetheless, we still are determined to find a way to increase overall the number of students, but in particular the number of students going to Magee. Established in relation to Magee, established an independent task force under the leadership of Stephen Kelly and Nicholas Skelly, and that will publish its action plan before the end of this year, and the funding required to implement the recommendations will be prioritised as part of the future year budgets. The executive, of course, has a key aim of providing affordable childcare as a priority, and improved access to childcare will be a key lever for my own economic goals. So we're committed to working with the Minister of Education as he develops and implements a bespoke early years and childcare strategy. We're also looking, by the way, at the issue of in skills, about how we contribute to providing more people in that area of work. That we look. That's been one of the focus in our discussions around skills, is how we make a contribution that through through the courses that are available, people making sure people have more qualifications in the childcare area, and we create a bigger pool of workers for that. If we can increase the number of people accessing that, we obviously need to increase the number of people working in that field. We're also I expect an interim report from them shortly, and we're looking at our own childcare support within the various sectors that we have authority over, like the education, further and higher education sectors, what childcare is available there, and we've asked for a report on that in the next couple of months. We're setting up a tourism partnership board to co-design an action plan for the sector, and the inaugural meeting of the board will be in the next few weeks. I think I'm meeting the chair of it tomorrow. To get that. A firm believer, as you will know, Chair, in co-design and in involving in whatever area of policy we're developing, and involving a range of people who are actually in that field in assisting us in developing and designing policies to make it as effective as possible and to have much buy-in. On the energy side of things, I've introduced a moratorium on onshore petroleum licensing, and that will be followed by a legislative ban. We've also launched a 5-year capital energy and resource efficiency and support grant for the business sector, 2 major geothermal demonstrator projects, one here on the Stormont Estate and one out at Caffrey. And then with more certainty in our trading arrangements, we want to see us make the most of the dual market access opportunities to support more local businesses to export and to attract inward investment. So we worked with Queen's University, UK TPO, to publish information that helps businesses better understand the types of products and sectors where dual market access opportunities could potentially be exploited. Rather than saying to everybody just get into this field, there are opportunities. We're trying to actually provide some accurate information to say these are the areas that will benefit most from development there. And so building on that, the Department and Invest have recently held the first co-design workshop with a range of business representatives here. Working in collaboration with Intertrade Ireland and the relevant partners in Britain, Invest NI is planning to establish a dedicated team to maximise dual market opportunities, and we also intend to make the most of the All-Ireland economy opportunities in the context of that. Despite the very difficult financial context, we have increased the budgets for Intertrade and for Tourism Ireland, and later in the year there will be a first joint trade mission which will be jointly led by ministers, myself and the Minister from the South, and involving the agencies from both North and South as well. One of the other issues which I mentioned, and it's our intention to launch very soon, is the Comprehensive Employment Rights Bill, and that's needed to ensure the legal framework that supports good jobs. I'll launch the consultation on that next week. I think we have already given some heads up to the committee in relation to that, and I hope to be making a statement. I've asked for space to make a statement next week in the Assembly, and that will invite views on a range of issues, including zero-hour contracts, work-life balance, and measures to strengthen the role of the trade unions. Just in terms of the budget, we received £767 million resource and £222 million capital. We have agreed draft budget allocations for the department and our partner organisations. Following a quality screening, I will examine the impacts before confirming the final budget allocations. And obviously the allocation's less than we requested. It is a small cash increase on our position from last year, and I will work constructively within the allocation to maximise the impact of the department and the partner organisations. The Department for Finance has recently commissioned the June monitoring. We hope, I think we had hoped to have an executive this week. We certainly wanted to see an executive meeting this week, but I'm told there is potential of that happening in the coming days to get the June monitoring issues resolved, and hopefully one or two other issues as well. But there's an additional £32 million of Treasury earmarked funding, and it's due to be allocated to the department as part of June monitoring. So that would consist of 16 million to fund ongoing work related to protocol and Windsor framework, and 16 million to support additional skills and entrepreneurship programmes and advance international expansion, all key aspects of the vision. So you can see we're very keen to get that executive meeting and get the funding from June monitoring issued across the departments, and particularly to our own. We'll continue to seek out additional funding sources to advance the actions required to grow the economy. The example department recently secured 17 million of funding from the Shared Prosperity Fund to advance their vital work in respect of skills, innovation, research and development and decarbonisation. This funding will flow from the Department of Levelling Up Housing, DLUC as it's known, in Levelling Up Housing Communities later in the financial year, in line with the normal budgetary processes. And as you're aware, we have 11.8 million of resource still for allocation. We have been looking and discussing with officials as recently even as yesterday in relation to prioritising this around skills. But we obviously then have to consider the full range of pressures within the department. But given that the department are still attempting to plug the gap that was left with the non-replacement of EU funding, which was primarily used for skills and training purposes, then we're trying, and given the vital need in terms of growing the economy, to get more people into skills and learning and upskilling within work, but upskilling people to access work, then we're trying to put a focus on that additional money in relation to that area. But as I say, that work is ongoing, and we'll obviously be able to update the committee once some decisions are taken in relation to that. So, Chair, I think that's a fair to skip across some of the issues. It's not great detail on a lot of them, and I'm sure we could spend days here going through the detail. Of course, we're very happy to come back, and officials obviously are very regularly up on specific areas of policy and proposals that are going through the department. Ian, I'm delighted, as you said at your introduction, that he's now been appointed permanently into that post. Having worked with Ian in the Department of Finance, I'm very pleased that he's in, that we are bringing significant change through the department. We're supporting and bringing significant change in relation to Invest NI, and trying to put a focus on the areas which we think are vital in terms of trying to grow the economy in the time ahead. We have spent a lot of time since I came in engaging with a lot of organisations which have an interest, particularly business organisations. The plans that we have outlined, the approach to them, have been very well received. People are encouraged that we're putting that focus on those areas, and so and I know in terms of your own work in the committee here that we've been very well supported in terms of your scrutiny work. The reason that we have, I'm sure we will get into that discussion, we have legislative programme which is challenging, and that requires us obviously to work very closely together with yourselves to make sure that the scrutiny functions are afforded the time necessary for them. I think that's going to be the case across probably all the committees and all the departments. My feedback that I've got is that all of the departments are trying to do more legislation in this 3-year window we have than was previously done in 5-year full terms. So that's going to be a challenge for us all in the time ahead, but we will commit to working very closely with you to try and make sure that we all fulfil the necessary functions in relation to doing that. So that's just by way of introduction, Chair, and both myself and unless you want to say a few opening remarks. No, you're happy, but myself and Ian are happy to take any questions. If there are specific details on issues that people ask and we don't have them to hand here, then we certainly will come back and write into the committee.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that comprehensive overview, Minister. And perhaps if we could start then just with your legislative programme. Obviously the committee was made aware of, firstly, the executive had agreed this year's legislative programme, and has had some sight of some requests from the department. Perhaps you could just talk through the committee through where you see the first number of legislative pieces coming?
Well, the one which we intend to announce next week, and which we've given you some heads up on site on, is the Good Jobs Bill. And that's fairly comprehensive. I think there's something like 75 questions going out for consultation in relation to elements that may be included in that. And I will know, and yourselves will know from any time I've been up questions in the Assembly, there's quite a lot of focus on various aspects that might be included in that. We want to ban the use of zero-hour contracts. We want to give more I suppose, support in terms of people who are in employment to make sure that exploitative practices are ruled out. There are a range of areas within that. That's probably the priority, and that's a substantial piece of legislation, in comparison to much of the legislation that goes through. We have, as you will be aware, been pressing the executive to take a decision in relation to RHI. We've managed to get a paper on for discussion at the executive, but it needs to be resolved, and in the court we're very clear that needs to be resolved, and my proposition in that will be to close the scheme down, but to do so in a way that's fair to those people who were fairly participating in it, but we need to get the executive to take that decision, and you will know the pressures that are mounting in terms of Ofgem and the other challenges that will arise if we don't, and also the continuing loss of finances that will be available for other schemes if we had had that decision taken some years back. So that will be a piece of legislation. We will be looking at the Utility Regulator, and I know he's had a discussion with the committee in relation to his powers and the focus on decarbonisation. That could open up significant areas, so we're kind of out to consultation on that, and it depends, given the challenges that we have in relation to the shortness of the mandate. We will see what comes back in relation to the utility regulator piece, but if we can do that in this mandate, if not, because there might be a lot of elements to that, but if not, we're keen. But we need a discussion with him as well, just to see if that needs to come forward as one piece of legislation, which would be large and require a lot of policy development, or if there are bits that we can do in advance. There are, obviously, in the petroleum licensing one is one that would be in the again in relation to what comes back in consultation. We have an insolvency amendment bill, which wouldn't be the hugest piece of legislation, and we will continuously be bringing through various bits. In relation to the Good Jobs Bill, we had committed that if there were issues which arose which could be done fairly quickly, that we would bring smaller issues through and get them done. It's the reason that we want to go to consultation was it's not ideal over the summer, because we've actually worked the clock back from the end point. So you're probably talking about 2.5 years with the best will in the world from now to these things would need to be through and on their way to royal assent. It's not even to the end of the mandate. I think the cut-off point for these things is generally about March before an election, say in May or June. So we're working our way back. So if there are bits of the Good Jobs Bill that can be done more quickly, we will look certainly doing that. But it's for a department, it's a significant enough piece, a programme of legislation, and I think that's going to be the case. I expect the Assembly over the next couple of years will be in a lot of sittings going through a lot of legislation, and that's good. That's what we're here to do, and obviously to try and do that well. So that's a sort of rough guide. If that changes in any fashion, we will certainly be able to inform you. But the Good Jobs Bill, RHI, would be priorities to get moving very quickly.
And I understand from press coverage, so the Carnegie framework is going to be your framework in which you're framing the Good Jobs Bill. Is that correct?
Is what, sorry?
The Carnegie framework is.
Yes, we have said that. Yeah, the Labour Relations Agency did a report which looked into that, and we've agreed that we would use that as a kind of a framework for definition of good job. Now that's one issue, is to define what we consider to be a good job, and then all of the other issues then in terms of legislation and protections will flow from that. That underpins, but it's not the totality of that. I mean, there are other things like employer, good job practices which can be promoted. The work that the real living wage people will do in terms of promotion. So there are things we can do legislatively, but there are a lot of things that we can support and do ourselves in terms of promotion of good conditions in work, good wages and rights for workers in that regard.
Then in that legislation, do you expect to legislate for the real living wage then across across Northern Ireland?
Well, that's power is held in Westminster, but there was the opportunity to transfer it. What we are looking to do is to see, okay, when I was in finance, obviously we brought that in terms of civil service. We brought it in terms of procurement and public sector procurement. But I think we will look at the option for legislating, but that will involve transfer. So that could impact on the time frame. But yes, as I think you were co-sponsored the event last week in the Long Gallery, in which we're trying to promote through Advice NI more visibility around the whole real living wage here, and so some of the things we can do immediately in terms of our support and promotion, if they and some of the things we'll do through the Good Jobs Bill, we will look at the issue of legislating for that, but that because we have to transfer it as well, that might take some time.
And then just turning to university places, obviously it's something which you, Minister, are very keen to grow, and obviously a lot of members have a particular interest in that. In different campuses, are you still ruling out an increase in student fees to help pay for that?
No, we've ruled out increase in student fees. I mean, everybody here will be very familiar with the fact that we're living in a time which is very, very challenging for a lot of people in terms of cost of living. I don't think it's fair. I actually think it could be counterproductive if we're trying to get more people into colleges. And people to look at colleges as an option as well, because that doesn't necessarily involve all the financial aspects, but also more people into universities. But to make that less accessible in terms of more expensive for people to go could be counterproductive. So it is a challenge because clearly we don't have the resources that we would want in order to do that. But we are in dialogue with the universities about how we can begin to expand that, how we can try and grow that, other ways we can come at that to try and grow the numbers. And of course, if we get a better financial outcome with a new government than we currently have and have had with the last government, then we may be in a space to do more in that regard. But I don't think the onus should be putting the burden on people who are trying to access university. We need people getting more skills, we need people getting more qualifications. We don't need to make it more difficult for people to try and access those. So while we want to create that space and of course have the people who feel that they have to leave here to go to universities, and we obviously had that debate the other day in the Assembly in relation to that, we want to be in a position where we can provide that level of support to allow the universities to grow. And there are other ways the universities can look at how they can grow themselves. We want to support them in doing that too.
What do you think that looks like? So you'll recall from that debate we had 6 out of 10 people who apply for Queen's University, not enough places. We send thousands of students to other parts of these islands to pay triple the university prices that they pay here. Clearly people are willing to pay that to go to university. We're saying that we're not going to increase student fees. What is the solution then to increase the student numbers?
Well, as we were saying the other day in the debate in the Assembly, there are a number of people who want to leave anyway. They want to go off and study elsewhere, and that's fine. It's the people who don't, the people who put down first option to be here and can't get in and are forced to leave. I think that's the area. And then there are other people whose motivation isn't quite that sure. So I think we also have a high level of people who do come back, so that there always is a kind of a narrative that everybody who leaves, nobody comes back. And that isn't the case. But we don't want people to have to leave. So clearly that's the cohort that we want to try and accommodate. And that is going to be challenging to do that. It's not going to be done overnight. It's going to be challenging given the limitations on the finances we available. As I say, I don't believe the solution to that is to make university more inaccessible for people, because I actually think that could bring down the numbers when we're trying to go in the other direction. And so we will, as I say, we have dialogue ongoing with the universities here. We will continue that to look at ways that we can find ways to support the increased numbers ourselves. We can support them in things that they do that will be able to increase the numbers, and we will continue to make the argument with the government for a better financial outcome, out of which we would hope to get, because bear in mind, growing the economy is a priority of the executive as well. It's not just for the department. We're a primary element in delivering that, but it is a priority for the executive. The key challenge in growing the economy has been identified as skills and learning. More people being able to access that. So we will be making a very strong argument for that priority to be matched with any increase in resource available to us.
If we just turn to tourism, so the committee had expected a tourism action plan. Obviously, that didn't quite come, probably based on feedback that came from the tourism strategy that was published when ministers weren't in office. But I know, Minister, you said that you'll be chairing a meeting of the new partnership. Have you appointed members to that board now?
Well, we have the chair appointed. We're going to meet the chair tomorrow. You're right, there was a tourism strategy out there. It was before we were in office. The department has a lot of strategies. I've always said if we had 5 years, we could go back and start to look at them and see could we redo some of them again. But there was a lot of welcoming of some of the elements of strategy. There were criticisms of some other elements of strategy. We think the best way to bring that forward is, rather than go back, because we don't have the time to go back and start redesign and redrawing, is to bring in a co-design group and then work out what does the elements of that strategy, which are very good, look like in terms of implementation. So we have the invites out for members of the board.
Yes,
Yeah. The board intends to meet in the next short period.
Who's the chair?
I didn't want to announce in case people haven't got. It's Stephen McNally is the chair. We'll be meeting him tomorrow, and then there are other members.
Forgive my ignorance, Minister.
Sorry?
Stephen McNally. Forgive my ignorance. Who is that?
He's the.
Mine's got a complete blank. I'm terribly sorry.
Yeah.
Hold on.
He's in the tourism industry.
He's manager of. Let's see. Tourism 5.
We were a bit circumspect about this in case this wasn't public in terms of suggesting who it was. There are in our intention to meet him, as I say, tomorrow. There are members then ready to go in that, and we will get that up and running very soon.
And how many members will be on that?
It's quite an extensive group, so there's over a dozen people have agreed to participate in it from across all parts of the tourism industry here, hoteliers and
Less than 20?
the exact number, yes, it's less than 20.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is make sure all of the various sectors have input to that. So we have people on the tourism side of things, but we're also looking at hospitality. We're looking at people across that broad range of provision.
Ian looks at members there. So
Yeah.
when we had Hospitality Ulster in a couple of weeks ago, they had raised concern that in their view they hadn't been included in a number of the bodies. So will Hospitality Ulster be represented on this?
It is our intention. I met them a number of weeks back as well, and they raised some of the same issues, and we said we would make sure that they had a voice at that table.
Okay.
So Mr. McNally's from Searles Hospitality Limited. Is a business that operates in the tourism sector.
Yeah.
And are you able to inform the committee of any of the other members?
Yes, we'll provide you with a list.
Yeah.
You can do that now or not now?
No, not right now. I couldn't go into the list. I don't have them.
We will correspond with
Yes,
you.
but we'll give you this.
No problem. Just turning then to...
But I mean, there's no sense of excluding anybody.
course.
We want this to be as inclusive as possible, because, as I say, co-design is about bringing all of the people that are in that area to work with you on delivery. And some of the people who were critical of the tourism strategy felt that there were gaps in certain areas it hadn't addressed. So we need to make sure that it does try and fill that. Yeah. And there also was a sense that perhaps it hadn't, over the years, had the same level of importance in the department that it merits, and in my view it certainly does merit importance, and we're trying to put that particular emphasis on it to make sure that the people who are in there recognise that it is an important issue for the department, and they're going to be respected in terms of their views, and the strategy will reflect what we collectively want to see coming out of it.
Dual market access then, Minister, obviously it's something in which your department is keen to promote. Obviously we've been back 6 months now. I'm wondering, what do you think's been the biggest investment or job creation as a result of the dual market access that we've had in the past 6 months?
Well, bear in mind that the exact, I suppose, terms of it, and there's still some fluidity in that, hadn't been made clear until the start of this year. So investment decisions aren't taken over the space of a week or 2 weeks. So what we want to do, there certainly has been a significant degree invest in. I have reported that, not just from the United States, the North American market, but also the European market. And what people now want to know, who have an interest in what does this look like? Okay, we have an access to British markets and the European markets. That looks interesting for people. What does it actually mean? What does it mean in terms of this precise business we're in? what does it mean, because they know that there are variations depending on the business. So the first piece of work was to research to say these are the sectors that would benefit the most. And what we want to do was then turn that into a proposition, which Invest NI would then take on the road, in the first instance in Europe. So when we were out, for instance, in the United States in March, talking to people, we were saying, yes, the dual access issues are now have more clarity, but the next thing people want to know is exactly what does that mean. So the benefit from all of that, I think there is a strong sense that people are very interested, not just in terms of investment here, but companies who are here want to get into the export market into Europe and to make sure that the east-west trade is working correctly as well. So the sense both Invest NI and Intertrade have is of a very significant level of interest, and potentially investments coming that way, and certainly potentially, which is an equal focus that we want to put in, is potential for growth of our own indigenous businesses here into that, to exploit that opportunity that we have. So that's where we're at. It's getting people detailed information. It's developing that proposition. There was an intention, actually. I think I was off work. I was due to go to Europe with them in May, over the month of May, and that was postponed then. But they have been out and using their offices to kind of push this out, to get a dialogue going with potential investors to look at that. But also what we want them to do through their work, through Intertrade work, is to bring that proposition also to local businesses. They understand that this, as you will know, is complex. It's not easily understood, the exact detail of how it works. So we need to make sure that the general sense that this is largely resolved is then turned into actually a value proposition that we can put to people, and that's the work that's been on. That is ready to go, and I think certainly from my conversations with Invest and Intertrade, that will yield results for us in the time ahead.
So our discussions with businesses indicate that part of the difficulty here is that a lot of the dual market access discussion is incredibly technical and complicated, and so what we need to do is turn that information into something which is easily communicatable and understandable for the business community. Effectively, they want to know, what does it mean for me, what do I need to do, how can I make this work, and so we need to turn a lot of that complex technical and regulatory stuff into something useful for them to work with, and that came out quite strongly from the engagements that we've had with Invest NI with businesses over the past couple of months, and we'll be working on that.
And just two final points for me. One, just in relation to our connectivity. So I read the part of the report then that York Aviation had commissioned or completed by the department. So just wanted to check where's the state of play of that then within the department. So we did a review into our connectivity here in Northern Ireland. Obviously the department already supports a number of air routes and a number of airports. For you, what was the takeaway from that report, Minister?
Well, maybe let Ian go into detail just in the broad context of it. You're right, we do support. We live on an island. Airport connectivity is vital in terms of our economic development. The particular level of support we would give to is the City of Derry Airport, again, because it is a vital component of the northwest region in terms of that connectivity. We have had discussions in recent times with the Department of Infrastructure, because the issue with airports, the difficulty is they kind of always falling between two stools, and we learned this lesson during COVID when we were trying to provide support to them and see who was responsible for it. So we have an agreement with the Department of Infrastructure. We will largely take responsibility for City of Derry Airport because that was a kind of a source of ongoing ping pong at times between the departments as to who had it's our intention to take that, to try and find the resource to support that, and we've communicated that to the airport as well. So York Aviation had reported into that and the necessity of maintaining that line. We're also have raised it in dialogue with Dublin in terms of some of the public service routes as well, and support for that, and obviously we had raised that in Whitehall in terms of support there too. So that's the broad context. The airports are vital. It was vital to keep them open when COVID was happening, and they have been back as that sort of strong connection, particularly in terms of the economy, but also in terms of tourism and investment.
Yeah. So the objective here obviously is to try to use the air connectivity to promote foreign direct investment and inbound tourism. So whenever we're looking at potential routes that can be developed, that's with the focus on those two particular issues. Also got to be mindful of the net zero and climate change obligations that all of the government is working under at the minute. So for example, in the tourism space, you'd be looking at North America and Europe basically being your area of particular focus, because those are shorter flights and less environmental impact, rather than looking further afield. So we'll be focusing very specifically on what the particular benefits of an individual route might be for that. Now this is, as the Minister has said, we're working with the Department for Infrastructure around bringing together the responsibility for airports and air connectivity, so it's easier for the airports to know who to deal with, but it's still quite a complicated regulatory environment where quite a lot of this stuff is devolved to us, but also quite a lot is reserved to Westminster. So we have to keep very close relationships with the Department for Transport around things like, for example, public service obligation routes.
So the report is now done. What's the next step then?
Well, it'll be published then after the general election next week.
Okay. So we've got a published report then. What do we do?
Well, then we will engage with the airports and the tour operators to see what can be reasonably achieved within the resources that we've got available. Obviously the committee will be aware that we have got a budgetary impact of the air passenger duty levy, which we don't actually get any benefit from in the minute. And so we need to have a look at
I've been
that.
speaking to Mr. O'Toole, who at Finance Committee loves to remind me on a weekly basis that we spend £2.5 million a year.
And I get that it's sitting there. The fact is, we go to the States, it's frequently asked, and it surprises me a little bit, because it's not a big island, so people do come into Dublin, they're only an hour or 2 hours away from parts of the north, but it still is raised as people who would consider to be beneficial if they could fly directly to Belfast. So it's the difficulties finding a carrier who can make it work. So if we were to forgo that and just say, well, that's off the table, then that might make that even more of a challenge. So, and I do get people look at it and say, why are you continuing to hold that? But I think it is something which is regularly raised with us in the United States in particular, about that connectivity. What we have been trying to do as well, as Ian says, the report will be published, we'll engage, but we're also trying to clear a little bit of the clutter between the departments here as well, so that when people do come back to engage, we're trying to take more of the responsibility into economy, because we see, okay, there are clearly infrastructure issues with airports and travel and transport, but a lot of the importance of our airports to us is in terms of the economy. So we're trying to sort of get our own houses a little bit more in order, so when it does come to the outworking of that report, that we're in a better space to engage with.
And just finally for me, so Public Transformation Board had obviously requested proposals from each department. Have the Department for the Economy submitted proposals to the Transformation Board? We
submitted 2.
Okay.
One was in relation to increasing the usage of apprenticeships in the public sector in Northern Ireland. So currently out of over 200,000 public sector employees, there are only 200 apprentices across the public sector, and you're probably aware that lots of parts of the public sector have difficulties with recruitment and retention. This is a route which might actually help and then therefore save money, because it provides a route for people who are in part of the system to unique progression. So it might be, for example, to help people in health and social care who are care assistants progress to become nurses, or classroom assistants progress to become teachers, and so forth. And there are also skills shortages in large areas in the public sector where we need to find some way of making us an attractive employer, or be able to recruit and retain people where we're competing with the private sector, and there are difficulties there around pay. The second proposal then was around transforming the system for provision post-19 for young people with special educational needs. So the Minister met Alma White, who's been campaigning on this issue recently, met her last week, but we have been engaging with Mrs White around this issue, and there's an issue there where Northern Ireland is falling short by comparison to other parts of the UK, and the economic benefit of this is that quite often you'll find people in Mrs White's position are forced to leave their jobs, and that has a significant impact on our economic inactivity rates. Then equally, there are a number of young people with particular kinds of special needs or disabilities who could actually have effective and productive careers if they were given the right support at post-19 stage. So we're looking at those as two ways of dealing with economic problems, but also improving the quality of provision for a vulnerable group in society.
And the second one will involve cross-departmental
Yes.
work. And we're keen to get that. But as Ian says, we have our own bid in terms of what we would like to do in that regard. But it will involve work across with other ministers as well, which we're keen to see happening.
I've got to also say that there wasn't time to have it worked up into a position to submit within the timeframes this time round, but we're also looking at a proposition to digitalise the work of the insolvency service and redundancy payments services, which are currently very manual processes, paper-based. That would be a significant efficiency improvement.
Sounds like an exciting task, but an important one.
Yeah.
An important one. Thank you both for that very much. Vice Chair Gary Middleton.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Minister and Ian, for what you've said so far. For me, just a couple of questions. The first one being one of the most pressing issues within my constituency is the issue of support for businesses, particularly the restaurants and the hospitality sector, the pressures that they're facing in terms of rates, in terms of energy bills, all of those costs. And Minister, I listened to you carefully in terms of the position around students and the increase of fees and the need, obviously, to protect them from rising costs. Unfortunately, it appears that the same doesn't apply to the business community and those within the hospitality sector. So my question is, Minister, what do you plan to do over the remaining years of this mandate to make a real difference? I appreciate that all of the responsibility is not with yourself. So could you maybe talk to whether or not this is something that is raised within the executive, whether you've spoken to your party colleague, the finance minister, about some measures that she could bring forward to try and address the real need that's affecting and effectively closing businesses within my constituency?
Well, I think there are a range of issues which affect hospitality and all of our businesses, retail and others, some of which are beyond our control, cost of energy, cost of doing business. And I mean, in that regard, the more we can actually advance our renewables, we get to that sort of self-sufficiency in energy, which leads to stability in energy costs, and that you don't become subject to fluctuations as they have been over the last number of years. So people were just coming out of COVID and all of the challenges that it brought, and then suddenly we got the war in Ukraine, completely outside of our ability to control any of that, and then the huge hike in energy costs, and that was clearly a challenge too far for a lot of businesses. So there are outside impacts that we have little influence on, although in the longer term, as I say, in terms of our energy ambitions, if we get to sustainability, renewable energies on this island, then we get to a stable energy price and hopefully a lower energy price for people. So those kind of fluctuations don't become a challenge. On the two things asked most primarily when I was in the finance position, and I've no doubt Kiva Archibald will continue to follow through on those. The rates on the VAT, on hospitality here is much higher than it is in the south of the island, and that presents a significant challenge. We did make that case on a number of times to Treasury. We didn't get much of a response. I would be hopeful, and I know that the Finance Minister will follow through with the incoming government and maybe see if there's a better option in terms of that. Interestingly, I see it been raised as an issue in the south where they have a lower VAT rate, that people are raising it as being too high and being a barrier on hospitality and tourism in particular. And in terms of rates, of course, there is that balance. When Ian will know this, because we both have this particular hat on. He was head of LPS and I was a finance minister. We did reduce the rates on commercial properties down by 18%. We very quickly moved into the COVID period on a complete rates holiday, so it was almost kind of the impact of that was almost lost in all of that, but it stayed at that frozen at that level. Rates do take in about 10% of our income, so the balance there, as I was saying in answering a question in the Assembly Monday, the balance there is, if you reduce that down to support businesses, you also reduce then the level of funds we have for other public services. So that's a challenge for the Finance Minister, and I've no doubt that she is listening very carefully to the arguments that have been made in relation to this. I think that what we can do in terms of being proactive in some of this, we can take work on the energy side. we can provide grants of support in terms of people trying to be more efficient in terms of their energy usage, which Invest NI are handling some of that support. But we can also try and attract more tourism, and we're working very clearly on a tourism plan to try and attract more custom into the area. And obviously, if we can improve the position in terms of good jobs, then there are more salaries, as there's more disposable income. So those are all longer term projects to try and improve both the market and the I suppose the visitor attraction that we have, to try and make sure that businesses benefit from all of that, to make sure, in particular tourism and hospitality, as I say, 70% of that is outside of Belfast. So there is a regional balance to that. We need to make sure that it's supported by all of the work that we do in the department, trying to encourage more business, more economic growth, better jobs, more disposable income. Then that all is a measure for supporting businesses, tourism, hospitality and retail and other businesses as well. So it is a challenging time because there are certain factors beyond our control, and we recognise that the difficulty is in kind of turning off some of the levers that we have, then reduces down the funding available for public services.
Okay, thanks, Minister. I would just ask, obviously, that it's an issue that we will come back to, but I hope it's raised as well within the executive and something that's obviously taken forward as a matter of urgency. My next question was around the issue of Invest NI and the reform, implementing obviously the recommendations from the Lions Review. One of the areas that you spoke about there in your introductory remarks was around the stronger role for sub-regional plans. Could you maybe talk us through in terms of your position? I appreciate Invest NI will be leading in respect of their remits, but for you, do you see that being something which will have targets? I know that it has been mentioned in the past around legislation and the fact that we've only got 3 years left, but do you see targets, sub-regional targets, as being a key focus for Invest NI to incentivise, obviously, investment right across Northern Ireland?
Yeah, well, we've been engaging with Invest since coming into office, particularly over the last couple of weeks, engaging in Invest in relation, and Invest are undergoing that transformation, that implementation of the report, and that we're the department are supporting them in doing that. We have some recommendations to pick up ourselves, and we're moving forward, and I'm satisfied that the thrust of making sure that that report is responded to in the appropriate way is still on course. And we need to keep that, because that has to be delivered on. But yes, we have asked Invest to refocus in terms of its regional presence and what it does regionally. And part of the purpose of this is not because there has been a tendency in the department to come down into regions and say, this is your plan, this is what's going to happen to you, this is what we've decided your target is. So we are trying to actually give more of a voice to the area and more support where that is required. So the two elements we've been discussing in recent times is the role of Invest in local areas, but also what support we can give to others there to make sure that there's capacity to develop economic strategies, ideas, propositions for each area in doing that. Invest overall, we have been looking at the issue of how we can use the support that they provide in general terms, in terms of people who are considering investment, how they can be encouraged to go into areas that they haven't been in before, or that they're areas of deprivation or areas of low levels of previous investment, how we can use the incentivisation that Invest have to attract investment towards regional balance. So we have provided a very clear strategic focus across the department in 4 areas. That applies to Invest as well. Invest are orientating their plans to support good jobs. So if they are going to incentivise somebody to come in, it will be around the priorities of good jobs, regional balance, around net zero and around productivity. So those will become elements of consideration in terms of how we incentivise inward investment, also in terms of how we support local Indigenous businesses. So we will want to make sure that those issues are reflected in terms of the levels of support that Invest offers.
Okay, thanks. And Chair, just a final question from me, just in terms of the University of Magee. The task force, obviously, I think, has met me a couple of times. It was said to us that the initial report would be completed by the end of summer. Is that still on target, obviously, for them? And have you heard from them? In terms of your engagement, how regularly do you keep in touch with the work that's ongoing, obviously, to ensure that whenever the report does come out, that ultimately it is likely that there will be finance required. Are you having conversations, with the finance minister as to making money available to deliver on the recommendations that will come forward?
Yeah, well, from my memory, the report was due before the end of the year rather than before the end of the summer. But the report will be coming in the next number of months. We're now into the summer, and yes, we are in very regular contact with them. There is an official that sits with them from the department to make sure the department's fully aware of the issues. As a matter of fact, we did raise at the executive an issue which came from them in terms of transport. So clearly there will be issues that they identify which aren't the remit for the Department of Economy. We have already raised that issue around transport and the need that there would be for public transport to support expansion of student numbers. We raised that in the executive with the Minister for Infrastructure, just to alert people to some of the issues that were being raised. And in terms of the support, yes, we have said we will identify in the future budgeting the elements that are required. We're already providing support for the expansion of Magee. There was support for an increase in numbers for this year's intake, and we will continue we will make the case, obviously, in the argument, because bear in mind the expansion of Magee is an NI commitment. It falls largely to the Department of the Economy to deliver on that, but it's not exclusively just. And of course, it's an NDNA commitment, means it's a commitment for the executive. So we will obviously continue to make the argument with the Finance Minister. I know she is also invested in terms of the expansion of Magee, but we will make an argument for a resource for that. But we have committed to providing the resources that are identified within the report whenever it's produced.
Thanks, Minister. What I would say is I do have the terms of reference here for the task force, and there was a clear commitment within that that there would be a report by the end of the summer.
Okay.
An interim and an action plan will be presented to you before the end of the year. So the reason I'm asking, and I think it's important that this is addressed, is because there are some people out there who believe that this was a can kicking down the road exercise, and the report coming forward will hopefully address those concerns and point to actually action coming forward as opposed to a can kicking exercise. So no, thanks, Minister, and we look forward obviously to hearing from you again in the near future. Thank you.
Yeah, well, this could be me mixing up between what is a report and what's the implementation plan, so it could well be on target for that. And I understand people in the Northwest and Derry in particular scepticism over many years of kind of false promises around Magee. And I think the task force group is off to a good start in terms of there was a clear recognition in Derry that this wasn't just simply about delivering more courses and more students. So this is a whole city approach, a whole region approach to try and support the expansion of Magee, and I think that's the focus on it. So we have a very clear focus on this. We have a very clear commitment to supporting what comes out of their implementation plan, and I'm reminding continuously the executive that this is an executive priority project and that this is to be delivered. So our focus is there. I get where the scepticism comes from. I get that people will want to see things happening, and there already is an increase in numbers, and we want to see more increase in numbers happening to give people more faith in that process. But I think we're off to a decent start.
Thank you.
Keeping with that theme, Sinead.
Right, just expand.
Has he stole your thunder?
Just, it's my understanding from the chair of the task force, the reason he wants to have the report earlier than later, because he's looking forward to the next financial year, so that there's plenty of time for the department to put the funds towards it, and so there's a push within the task force itself to report early. So,
and we won't discourage them from coming early and articulating their demands, so we're very happy to receive it whenever they're ready to deliver it.
So just on that, obviously in the budget there is money set aside for in this year, the 24-25. So I'm wondering, do you know the numbers for the intake, the new numbers for the intake in September? Yeah. And what disciplines, what courses are they doing? And is this added MASN that is coming, or is it within the existing MASN provision for Northern Ireland that the new students are coming from? And again, is it existing courses or new courses? We've
been told the numbers are the additional numbers that we had sought to see. I don't have the exact breakdown of course by course. We have an argument that Magee can exceed MASN. and we will support them to do that, and that's something that we have agreed. So those numbers are in place. I didn't have the totality of them when you asked that the other day, but what we can do, I think there's going to be an announcement in the very near future about the courses that will be involved in that, and the spread of those numbers, but we're content that they are going to be delivered for this incoming academic year.
Ballpoint figure?
I think it was the 500 that was suggested, yeah.
Is that including the oversubscribed mass in the previous academic year?
No,
so that it's, you know, the way they were oversubscribed, and but they've got a buy ball for that.
Yes.
And those are banked, so this is in additionality.
Yes.
So this is new count.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But we don't have, and the university would need to announce this themselves, because they will have the detail of the numbers for each whatever discipline or courses are involved in.
And it's and all the numbers are in Magee. It's all Magee.
Yes.
Okay. So, and then the other thing, we had a briefing last week from Dr. Lisa Wilson, and it was around the issue of quality jobs and the metrics and the data in and around that. And she talked about the survey carried out by UCD on working in Ireland and the findings of all of that. So it was quite clear the quality jobs where you lived mattered, and around the border counties there were significant disparities on the quality of jobs. In relation to sub-regional balance or regional balance, what kind of metrics and what kind of data collection and research are you engaged in order so that we have that data that will, I suppose, guide you in legislation in terms of a good jobs bill? Because unless we know the depth of the issue, we can't really make sure that the legislation actually will be transformational in terms of delivering good jobs.
Well, there already is significant data out there, which we have tapped into, and Lisa Wilson's an academic who, as part of her job, is producing data on this and analysing data in relation to it. We already know that the level of wages in the Northwest is much lower, a higher level of unemployment, lower level of wages. Those figures are already there. That's an assessment of where good jobs is going, or where prioritisation around good jobs need to be. Good jobs is much more than just wages. There's a whole range of factors, and that's why we've looked at the Carnegie recommendations in terms of the definition of good jobs. So that data is there, and we'll continue to gather data from economic research sources as well, to make sure that any of the legislation to be brought forward has to have a good empirical base in terms of evidence to support it, and we will continue to do that. As I say, Lisa Wilson has been brought in as an outside expert to assist the department. There's quite a lot of expertise within the department. There's quite a lot of research goes on out there within various economic institutes and academic institutes to provide data for all that. So we will utilise all of the data that's available to us to make sure that we have the most effective legislation in terms of good jobs. But it also informs our regional balance, and these things all overlap.
Yeah.
So the 4 priorities all are interlinked, and our 4 people who have come in to assist us in it constantly have a circular dialogue in relation to how those work on the department itself, as a dialogue across all of the component parts of the department about how they are interlinked. So, I mean, those will be the measurements in terms of improvement in regional balance and good jobs when you see the data that currently exists and how we try to change that, how we try to improve on that.
When we discussed it with Lisa, I indicated that should a survey of the same nature be carried out here, and she said yes, because metrics really do matter in all of this area. Yeah. So would your department commit to that level, at that in-depth
Absolutely.
survey?
I mean, it wasn't that there wasn't a facility for doing that in the department. There's plenty of research capability within the department, and there's a lot of research capability available to the department. I mean, I constantly get reports on various research and data and things that, just to support what you're doing to make sure that's as informed as possible. But I think Lisa brings that outside perspective, which is a bit more holistic, which I think is, and it's been very much welcomed in the department, which says, it keeps that clear focus on data around good jobs. That's the area that she comes from, and that's the reason that she was asked in to assist us on it.
Okay, and just going back to what Guy was talking about in terms of Invest NI and incentives, what kind of incentives are you talking about to encourage investors to go to particular places that potentially those good jobs need to go to?
Well, Invest NI already, all business agencies offer incentives. And most business agencies actually tailor the incentivisation to priorities within their particular economy. That necessarily hasn't always been the case with Invest NI, that they weren't, there was a recognition that in programme for government documents for many years that there was a regional imbalance. So the levers that you have to try and affect the change in that weren't necessarily being used, and that's what we've tried to do. So Invest NI offer financial incentives for people to come invest here. They offer financial incentives for people to grow. They offer, the issue that we're looking at is the issue of land banks. So where does Invest NI have land and where does it not? And if we're identifying that there are significant areas of less growth, then what is there for what, if Invest don't have any land there, how are we going to encourage growth? So they're looking at areas of land. They're looking at they provide support in terms of startup. They provide support in terms of training and support for employment. They provide a range of financial supports to business. If we're saying that the priorities of the department and now the priorities of Invest are regional balance, good jobs, productivity, net zero, then those can be built into the incentivisation. So that if a company's coming here, you're saying, well, to be quite honest, we're offering this support and we would like you to consider this area. We have to have land there, and that's a challenge because there are parts of the across the north where there is economic activity happening, and Invest NI don't own a blade of grass. And people then are looking to invest there, build more factories there, and they have to go off and look in other places. So these are straightforward. Some of these are straightforward things, but they're tools that were available which just hadn't been used because there had been no direction to use them in a particular way.
Yeah, and Minister, I appreciate you're saying that much of this, your vision overlaps one another, but also to deliver regional balance, other departments need to support you in that. For example, Department of Infrastructure, Department for Communities, Department for Health, for example. So how does your vision cross all departments, and how can you deliver? How can you ensure, for example, that the Health Minister delivers regional balance in his portfolio?
Well, the department has the executive an overarching priority to grow the economy. The areas where there's most potential for growing the economy are the areas where there's least economic activity, because you have almost full employment. So there's significant potential to grow the economy in the west, in the border regions, outside of Belfast. So we're already talking to the investor, talking to Northern Ireland Water, for instance, about if we develop facilities, if we develop shovel-ready facilities, we need services to them, we need, so they're already talking to people about how the issue of land can support regional balance. And we will continue to talk to all of the departments where it's identified, okay, we could do more work here. I'm not sure what the Department of Health could do, but if we could do more work here, certainly infrastructure, communities, other departments are involved in that. So we will continue to make the argument that growing the economy is a priority for the executive. The areas with most potential for growth are the areas where the economic inactivity is highest. That's because the big challenge we have is getting people and skills. The biggest pool of people available to us who are currently not there are people who are economically inactive, and that's where we have to go and look for that. Also then, the programme for government consistently has had a piece about addressing regional imbalance. And that's infrastructure does that in terms of the roads, the S6, the A5, the rail line into Derry, all of those pieces, but also in terms of Northern Ireland Water and where it's developing so to allow business to develop. We can't have one part of government tripping up the ambitions of the entire executive. So we will be in dialogue with each and every department as that issue arises with us. And I constantly repeat that refrain is that the executive priority is regional balance and the executive priority is growing the economy, and those two things have to be delivered collectively.
You do appreciate, regional balance has been, as you've said, in the programme for government for many, many, many years, and it hasn't happened. So it needs a step change.
Well, it has to a certain extent, bear in mind. We're not saying nothing's happened. The A6 has been many years in development.
Levels of deprivation in Derry are actually greater now than they were back.
Well, the economic challenges across the board are greater now. But in terms of regional balance, there have been, A5 has been held up not due to the executive's reluctance to do it. It's been held up due to legal issues and, legal challenges. The A6 has now been completed all the way to Drumahoe. There's more work to be done on the end of that. The railway line into Derry is completed. The support for Derry Airport has been reinforced time and time again. Propositions financially gone to the executive, which has been supported. So there has been that has been delivered in certain areas, but not enough. And there are other areas, other tools that we can use to affect that. And that's in terms of the Department of Economy what we're trying to do.
And childcare.
Yes.
So childcare, and you talked about developing a workforce for childcare, which is really, really important. And again, ensuring that workforce is a quality job for those working in that industry. What engagement are you making with the task force, the childcare task force? Are you providing papers, documents?
We're providing officials.
Officials. Because
in the department, Ian could maybe give more detail. The department, we would have the experience of, part of this would be depending on the exact pilot comes, but assumptions part of this is going to be investing and supporting childcare provision. So that's going to involve finances, which isn't necessarily the experience of the Department of Education. They have childcare policy and that aspect of it. We have the business side of it. So that's where we're providing the support currently, and we will be willing and ready to provide any other supports that are required, but maybe Ian could give you some detail.
Yeah, so whenever the task force was established earlier in the year, we pulled together a group of officials who got background in developing and designing grant funding schemes, so including in the Department of Finance as well as in our department and Invest NI. So those people are now working with the Department of Education to help them develop the financial support mechanisms that they were discussing. There's a member of staff from Invest NI who's working with the Department of Education 2 days a week to help them deliver this. And we've got a group of people in the skills group in the department who are looking at the skills issues which are associated with childcare, including the barriers that come about from getting staff into work. So one of the difficulties they've had in other jurisdictions, whether that's in the Republic or in Britain, whenever they've introduced these childcare schemes, is that the providers aren't able to respond to the increased demand because the staff are not available. So in attempting to deal with those issues downstream, we're looking at the skills, and it then sort of ties into your previous comment about working jointly with other departments. But we then find if we can increase the pace at which people are trained and they and provide the skills programs or the apprenticeships that will allow them to come forward, then we run into a bit of a barrier, which is accreditation registration of those people with the social services. So we need to work jointly with them about making sure we don't deal with one problem, we need to run into another bottleneck further downstream. So that's the work we're engaging with. So it's pretty proactive and pretty intensive. And the response I'm getting from the staff who are engaged in that is that they're starting to see a lot more progress being made and more significant impact on the work that's being developed. And they're fairly confident that they're going to be able to make a good result.
Thanks, Ian. And just to be mindful as well of workforce development for a particular sector of early years, and that is those working in Irish medium in the childcare sector. They're really struggling with workforce development, and they need the support of the Department for Economy. It is not an education piece. Well, it can be joint, but it's workforce development, so just be mindful of seeing what support can be put in there.
We had the conversation with skills people yesterday actually in terms of if we the additional money we spoke about at the start and putting in skills and around those areas. So all of that and the one of the focuses was on the childcare side to make sure that we have the skills and the training, and the accessibility is, Ian has reminded of, is an issue because we could do all that and then run into a bottleneck of accreditation. But yeah, we will certainly feed that issue in relation to language support as well.
Thank you, Sinead, and keeping with the theme of the Northwest, Padraig.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, it will be keeping with the theme of the Northwest, because I think that one of the things I've heard and seen from so many businesses, and particularly from Magee, in recent months is a belief for the first time ever that we can actually deliver this real change. So I think it's really, really positive. A lot has been achieved since we've come back in February. And I see that ambition and that growth and actually that excitement in local businesses and with local sectors that we haven't seen before. So I have 3 areas which I want to raise today. First one's around Magee, second one's around the Skill Up programme, and the third one is around the nighttime economy. So around Magee, firstly, obviously, Conor, you've already given a commitment on that. I think there's been a real ambition and a real opportunity for growth there. I'm in regular contact, as you know, with Magee, and they're excited to see what can change and what can happen. I appreciate there's already been a bit of engagement from Gary and Sinead on that, but could you just give us an update on the task force, where things are at, and where things are at going forward in the next maybe 18, 24 months?
Okay, well, I mean, as you know, we brought in who I think are a very good chair and a deputy chair, and part of that was because they're very skilled at what they do and they're passionate in both developing the Northwest and in the developing academically institution there. But also I think it's to give confidence to people that there are people who wouldn't be involved if it wasn't a serious project. And it is a serious project, and they believe that to be the case. The university's on board. They've always been emphasising their commitment to that, and we want to support them and help them to deliver that. I mean, we have obviously departmental support in there as well, and we have actually commissioned administrative support from the department to make sure that they have the necessary, because quite often if you don't have that, these things can end up as stocking shops, and you need that administrative support. So we've provided that resource to the committee to make sure that it can do its work and that it's supported in doing its work. And the university have committed, obviously, in terms of their facilities and other resource support to that as well. So that's the start that we wanted in relation to it. What they need to do is get down and identify the short, medium and longer term issues that we have. They know the target is to get, as NDNA committed to, 10,000 students. What we want them to do is identify how that would be done in terms of a whole city, whole region approach, whole executive approach, what is required in that regard. We've already had some requests filtered through from them in the immediate term in terms of looking at things like public transport, which we have then raised with the appropriate departments, and we'll continue to do that. So we're very much looking forward to getting the report from them. The implementation plan, as I say, we will align our budgets to try and match what they're asking for. We will argue for more money to do that. We're already making progress, obviously, even not just in this year, but over the last number of years, in terms of the general graduate entry medical school and some of the improvements that have been done there, and we're starting to see the numbers increase. We want to see that continue at pace, and that's the ambition. And they have 3 years to the end of the mandate in terms of what I have asked them to do. I would hope when that runs its course that the project will be very well developed and well on track for what it needs to achieve. But that work that they are doing will continue in some shape or form beyond that to make sure that we deliver in relation to all of that. But I want to set a course that puts us very firmly on a target that was talked about, was agreed, but was never really developed in the way it should have been. And there have been some good developments prior to my coming into office in terms of the medical school and other growth in the campus and that there, but what we need to see is a step up to meet the ambition that we have for all of that.
No, definitely, and it's been very positive. I think even, I suppose, the range and diversity of skills and ability on that task force is really impressive, and the leadership on it. I think one of the things you've touched on it there that's been really key is that in the past this has always been seen as something that's an issue for dairy, and yes, there are huge benefits to dairy, but the way it's been looked at by the department and by the executive now as an approach across the whole of our region and actually across the whole of Ireland is really, really vital to that work going forward. To touch on the second point around that, I know on the task force there's representation from further education as well, and I think that's imperative because it ties in that whole lifelong learning and accessibility piece, particularly now when we're looking at access courses and that, I suppose, broader swathe of education right across the board. So I was looking to touch a wee bit on the Skill Up programme. It's something that I know the Northwest Regional College have been very involved in. Great programmes and other colleges that I've met with as well. So I was just looking for an update on that as well, please.
Okay, well, I think the broad point that you make in terms of the roles of colleges in all of this, I mean, Magee is seen as a central catalyst in the Northwest, but the bigger piece and perhaps equally exciting piece is that linkages between the colleges, between Letterkenny, that kind of and that also is of significant interest to the government in Dublin as well. I've had conversations with that department there and will continue to do that in the time ahead. So I think there's a broader context in terms, that feeds into the necessary skills agenda that is critical in terms of economic growth. So the Skill Up project was the fund of it largely came. It didn't come necessarily from the department, but it came through that NIO fund. Yeah, and obviously that has come to an end. All the feedback we have got on it has been a very popular program. It's very accessible. It seems to have worked very well. The evaluation will be completed in the next week in relation to it. We're currently looking at an additional amount of money the department has and trying, as I say, with an emphasis in skills in relation to that, but obviously considering what other very pressing issues the department has to deal with. But it seems to me a very strong positive feedback in relation to Skill Up, and it's something that we would want to be looking at again. And we are looking at how we spend that bit of additional money in skills in the near term. But that evaluation's coming in the next few days, 30th of June, I think it is. The next few days.
We should have it finished and get the advice to the Minister on it. I'll just say, in relation to some of the other things that have been discussed, the Skill Up programme, the results, and this is not prejudging what the evaluation will say, but the results of who took part in the Skill Up programme very strongly skewed towards rural areas and west of the Bann. So it is quite a strong intervention in terms of regional balance, and also the age profile of the people involved was majority over the age of 25. So then that's about skilling up the existing workforce and helping people move on to higher quality jobs. So quite an important intervention within that.
Yeah, totally agree. And I mean, even anecdotally, what we've been hearing in Foyle is exactly that. It's people who are on a job who maybe don't have time to go and do a full-time course or don't have the opportunity or the finances to commit to doing that. So it's been a real opportunity for them to upskill, to reskill, and to go into maybe sectors and spheres that they would never have imagined themselves in. So really, really good programme, and it's very positive to hear that the department are looking at that. My last question is just around the nighttime economy. So we had a really useful presentation last week or the week before in committee, and it was from hospitality. It was around the nighttime economy. I think that's obviously something that's imperative to our entire economy. So it's...
Sorry, members. Just bear with us. Sorry about this. It's been a bit ropey all day. Do you want to talk among yourselves for a minute? This might take a little while to come back. He's right in mid-flow as well. Can't believe it.
While in relation to the Skill Up programme, Ian, how much did that cost the department a year?
I think the total cost of the previous iteration is 8 million.
And we have 11 million unallocated in relation to skills.
But there are a number of pressures.
Of course,
so the Minister will have to make prioritisation decisions within that.
But but the feedback on Skill Up has been very, very positive, and as Ian said, a number of the particular objectives we have were met very well by Skill Up programme. But then we obviously want to look at the child care issues, and so there are a range of pressing priorities in relation to that. But and obviously the colleges are very much up for collaboration in terms of delivery. So just on the nighttime economy, Patrick, before you get lost again, listen, clearly it's again not the work of any singular department. It's going to require cross-departmental work. So we have responsibility in terms of the economy, communities obviously, in terms of streetscapes and all of the stuff going to even High Street Task Force, which is located in TEO, infrastructure, because one of the key issues that's mentioned to us in terms of night economy is the the availability of transport, whether taxis or bus services, train services, even in and out of Belfast, to support people. So key consideration, obviously, in nighttime economy is people safely returning home, particularly women safely returning home from it. So there are a range. We have that development now of ASAR in Belfast, which I think we're meeting. The department's meeting them this morning, just to have a conversation around that. And that, I think the broad lessons that can be pulled together from how we support that are applicable across all towns and cities across the north. So I would expect that we'll see much more dialogue around that, but it does require collaborative work between the departments. The one thing I have said, and I keep saying this since I came into this particular executive, is there's more evidence that I have seen in this executive of cross-departmental collaborative work than I've seen before. Quite often that doesn't get any focus of attention from the media because it's more interesting if people are knocking lumps out of each other than working together, but there is a significant level of cross-departmental collaboration. Part of that is born out of the fact that we don't have the resources we need, and if we don't pool those in some instances, then we won't get them to stretch as far as we need to do that. But it's also born, I think, out of a genuine desire to work together to get better outcomes, and so we will continue to work in that vein on the nighttime economy as we are already working on a range of other issues.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think Gary and I keep getting kicked out on the free Zoom today, but that is essential. It's the cross-departmental stuff, and I suppose what I just cut off in the middle of saying there was around that nighttime economy piece and the cross-departmental stuff being essential to that. My last point was actually just to come back to the Skill Up programme and that All Ireland working as well. So one of the things which we agreed as committee a number of weeks ago was to have both ATU and DKIT from Dundalk on as well. So I think that's really positive. I know the department are already working on that and that All Ireland space as well, because particularly when we're looking at regional balance, we're looking at rural areas, for people in Fermanagh to be able to go to Sligo IT and so on. Massive opportunity there, massive area for growth, and it really touches on all the priorities that the department are working on. So I think it's been a really positive first 4 months. Again, just to emphasise, that's what we've been hearing very clearly in Derry, and long may continue.
Okay. Well, there already are very strong linkages between the colleges and the universities across Ireland, and obviously some of the issues we experience in terms of disadvantage in the border areas is the same on the other side of the border. Its peripherality from the centre causes a lot of that. So the opportunities for working together, the opportunities for support from things like Shared Island Fund, where they're very, very keen to do work in the border areas and in the northwest in particular, I think then encourages us to continue to work together in terms of skills, educational output, and I think there are significant opportunities for changing the dial in those areas, but also for getting increased support particularly from Shared Island Fund.
Thank you, Patrick. David.
Thank you, Minister and Ian, for coming in. Just to start, just to actually thank you for Alma White and what you said there, because if there's a story of a parent with a mission to deliver change, she's it, and it's really encouraging to hear that, Ian, especially that change will be made. But whenever I was looking at the Labour parties, I'm expecting the Labour government to win next week, whenever you look at their kickstart economic growth, the levers they talk about are effectively all here. There's only one is basically that they say the tax won't increase beyond 25%, but all the rest of them are here, but they're not necessarily in the Department of Economy. So they're across. So they're rail links, road building, housing planning, small businesses been paid on time, and boosting investment. But I appreciate your words there and what you said about the executive working together, but planning is a major problem for the economy. And in my own constituency, we have 3 major businesses. 1 we've lost, and 2 we're fighting hard to try and get the planning process through. And then you have the energy sector as well having problems. But this is a major stumbling block to actually grow in our economy. Has there been any discussions between the 2 departments to try and push
Yeah.
this along, the reform of that system?
And firstly, in relation to Alma White, yes, very pleased to meet her, and departmental officials had met her prior to that, and they're going to continue to meet her. I mean, I'm sure all of you, like me, as a constituency representative, have worked on these issues where we have kids that hit 19 and just suddenly dropped off the edge of the system. And I have, over the years, many cases in my own constituency and kind of run into brick walls with it. So we're now in a position where it has been raised again, and we're determined to try to do something about it, and obviously work with other departments to do that as well. In relation to planning, yes, I mean, when the potential executive parties were having discussions last year, one of the key issues was identified was planning, and I from the discussion that I remember, it wasn't particularly an issue of planning policy was a problem, it was the bottlenecks in the planning system. And so there was a resource identified to try and ensure, because I think for most people who are interested in development, they want an answer. If the answer is yes, great, but at least they don't want to be waiting 5 years on an answer. We had a joint meeting with the infrastructure minister, and I know that they are trying to get the resource. I think it's that transformation fund. They may be looking for support to try and increase the resource among the consultees, if you like, to ensure that there's a speed up in that process. I think I agree with you. I think I know in my own constituency of developments that could have happened or potentially going to happen that would have transformational impacts on towns, and particularly cumulatively. But if they're all sitting waiting on planning and nobody's moving, then it actually creates an impression that the place you aren't able to do business in it, and people move on to other projects that they can do. And also then we need a consistency across the 11 council areas, so we don't want a situation where it's been seen to get easier to get planning in council A than council B, as it just causes a drift of potential investment across council boundaries. So there is a very clear recognition that is not working in the way it needs to. It's not all just about economic development. It's not all just about plan. But as I say, my sense of it, the discussion was, it wasn't a plan and policy issue. It was a resource in terms of making sure that the system works smoothly and efficiently, and that the turnaround in terms of decisions, whether they be yes decisions or no decisions, but we need turnaround in decisions and much quicker than it's happening.
Absolutely, it's the timelines is the thing, and you're right. It looks like we're closed for business if you can't get. I have two at the minute that we're dealing with, are major employers in the area, and you've got the thought of losing those to effectively the south is not what we want in the area. We've got a great job. So part of the next part of them, we're talking about invest in NI and dual market access, and obviously the GB is a massive market for us, but the sort of Irish dimensions, the low hanging fruit, if you like, that we can grow into Europe. But you talked about a joint mission, a trade mission there. How can we ensure we aren't in competition whenever that happens with the south, that we go in sort of collaboration, if you like? How do we ensure that is the case for Northern Ireland?
Well, listen, you have economic agencies, so you have Enterprise Ireland, which is about growing the indigenous businesses. You have IDA, which is about attracting investment, and Invest in I were in that space. And I think over many years, even though the relationship between them was very good, you did get that sense of competition. But I think there's a growing recognition, and certainly when I'm talking to ministers in the south, that there's much more to be gained from collaboration. There's much more benefit. That the whole idea that we're developing now about clusters, which are across the island clusters, that there's much more to be gained from supporting our indigenous businesses to grow. So part of the emphasis on the joint missions will be about our own indigenous businesses and how we assist them. It's not going out to people and say, come and invest to us primarily, but it's going out and say, here's what we do. Here's how you can do businesses. We do this in very well. I mean, there was an invest trip, I think, after the Washington stuff to Singapore, which particularly in the area of green technology, which was highly impressive and received very, very significant interest on the other side of that. That was going out and saying, this is what firms here do. This is what we can do for you, rather than this necessarily, because one of the difficulties, if we attract a huge amount of inward investment, it's trying to find the people to actually fulfil the jobs that might be created. But I think that an equal emphasis is on growing our own business. So yes, there has been an idea of competition, but I think certainly in my dialogue with, and I met IDA, and I've met Enterprise Ireland as well in my dialogue with them and with the ministers responsible in the south, and there's been turnover there, but certainly that broad sense is that there's a lot to be gained from collaboration, and there's more to be gained in that regard from collaboration and competition. So I think we can manage those relationships. Invest NI will do what it's doing, and its own people that it's talking to and pursuing interests of what's, and I'm sure IDA are doing the same. But it's not that kind of competitive thing that it was perhaps in the past.
Just as a practical example of where this kind of thing might work in practice to the benefit of both. So in the Republic, there's some parts that have had to place moratoriums on the development of new data centres because the grid connections aren't available, whereas we don't have, or we haven't had that same growth in data centres on this side of the border. So there's an opportunity for us to work together jointly on that, because data centres and the availability of data storage is going to be critical for lots of new industries in AI and robotics and all kinds of tech. So we are able to provide data centre infrastructure here, which could be used on all parts of the island. That's a practical example of where we can work jointly without it necessarily adversely affecting one or other side.
Yeah, I totally appreciate there's two sides to this. There's taking our companies and selling them to the world, and then there's the inward investment back again. It was the inward investment back again was the bit we met the American consulate, and one of the things they asked, what can we do, basically before Joe Kennedy, before the presidential election, and it was take our companies and showcase them in America. Absolutely, if we can grow that.
We are actually arranging we had a conversation with Joe recently. We're arranging the creative industry people to go out to the States
and as a cluster, taken as a cluster.
Our creative industry visit here, because we're actually showcasing firstly what we have here, but secondly the investment that's been happening in terms of studios, and particularly out in North Belfast side, the investment's been happening there. So yes, we are looking at all of those issues. So they're joint delegations for this particular aspect, but we're continuously an investor continuously working across the world, and growing those links and making those connections.
If you go out to bring back, so if we're looking at the inward investment rather than the export, and we're bringing, how does that work without? I know you're saying we're working collaboratively, and I think we should be absolutely working. We shouldn't be in competition. But we should be working together. But how does that work without some sort of agreement? How do we get our fair share, if you like? So if it's a football team, if it's Arsenal and Brentford go out scouting for players, both Premier League teams, but one's top of the league and one's mid-table, how do the players not get attracted to the big rather than?
I don't think we can argue for them to reduce down their offer. No. I know that's not what you're saying, but I think they recognise. You see, there are many parts, particularly a bit like here, but perhaps more so in the south and Dublin area, where they've almost at capacity in terms of growth, and they recognise that the areas for continued growth are the west and the northwest. That's the areas of potential growth. So I think there are linkages to be made there. I get a stronger sense of collaboration. So I don't think necessarily we get into a space where we say, well, you can have 2/3 and we can have 1/3, and that's the way it always has to be. There are going to be different businesses attracted here for different reasons into different locations, and as Ian said, there are opportunities for very practical collaboration. But there are also opportunities to join our businesses to make sure that we have those clusters operating together and to push that out, actually grow. So inward investment was the thing for a long number of years, and that was understandable because we were, particularly here, low employment. We needed to grow people into work and not significant levels of local investment. That balance has changed somewhat, and you have much more global uncertainty, which means bigger firms are less inclined to take decisions in terms of investment because of global uncertainty. So there is an opportunity to grow our own businesses, and obviously that is a much stronger, more certain economic prospect for the country, whatever side of the island you happen to be on. And so there's an emphasis there, and there's an understanding that there's an awful lot to be done in terms of collaboration there, which is going to be very, very beneficial.
I appreciate it. Exporting our own is wealth comes from it, so that's absolutely. Just moving on then, if we look at tourism, I had them here a few weeks ago, but I'm just conscious Aer Lingus, and we've strikes happening from today are happening currently. 20% roughly of flights are going. Has there been any discussions around Aer Lingus, those strikes, how we're impacted? A lot of people obviously from here will use Aer Lingus flights from Dublin, but obviously you've got flights in Belfast as well. Has there been any discussions or any update of how we're impacted here?
The industrial action?
Yeah, with flights.
Well, no, because obviously we don't have any direct input. Aer Lingus is still partly state-owned, and there's obviously a dispute between the pilots and the employers there. We would hope that it doesn't impact over the course. I think the industrial action was from today through to Sunday, so they're expecting about 20% of flights to be grounded. We're obviously keeping a close watch and brief on how it impacts the airports here, how it impacts tourism on the island, because 70% of our visitors come through Dublin. So our international visitors come through Dublin. So yeah, it has implications. All we can do is hope that the issues which have caused the dispute are resolved as quickly. There seem to be, what I saw yesterday, I think, is that some called kind of arbitration, whether it's a labour relations court or some kind of arbitration beginning there. So I'm hoping that does have the effect of resolving it. But yeah, we'll obviously have to keep a close watch and brief, but we don't have any direct input in terms of the dispute. I don't know how much input the government in Dublin itself has, but we can keep in contact with them. But I mean, you would want to see that resolved, the issue of pay or whatever, the conditions are satisfied and the service operating as normal, because in terms of bringing people to the island and our tourism sector, but also in terms of that connectivity, it's very, very important.
And if we look at Belfast, sort of international, if you like, Dublin, you've cap of 32 million passengers. We had tourism and our Ulster University guys here a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about, tourism is 5.6%, I think, of the GDP. That should be, or a region like this, you would expect around 10%, and it's growing. So it's getting passenger numbers rather than that 70% coming into Dublin, but transferring a portion of that and rebalancing that to Belfast. But one of the things that they said to us at that time was the infrastructure around the airport. So it wasn't just how do you connect flights if you can't actually access the airport. Has there been any discussions at all at any point with the Department of Infrastructure to how rail roads are improved to try and increase the 7 million capacity or numbers in Belfast, to try and grow that to encourage more routes in?
Well, I suppose it's going to depend on the Department of Infrastructure priorities, and the level of funding they have.
I mean, from the Department of Economy, is that a
no, but I mean, if you were to talk about the connectivity to the airports, as in the surrounding infrastructure, would be a role for the Department of Infrastructure itself. I have to say, from our identification of it, it's not the connectivity from airport to where you're going doesn't be one of the main features. Features are, I think we'll have more to worry about if the ETA comes in, be more problematic for us. But it's also improving our tourism offer. Now the numbers that we've have been growing very well over the last number of years, and in many cases are back to pre-COVID numbers, and they're particularly growing in terms of people coming up from the south. So there's quite a lot of our tourism comes across from Britain. There's quite a lot of it comes up from the south, which isn't necessarily reliant on the airport infrastructure to come over. But yeah, I mean, if it's identified as a significant issue that's deterring people from coming, we could certainly have a conversation in relation to that. The task force that we put together, I imagine, will look at the broad range of issues impacting on tourism, but it is moving in the right direction. But you're right, there is an imbalance. We have a lot further to go, but there are also parts in the south that are further to go. There are big tourist spots in the south, and there are other parts that are outside of that as well. But I think when you talk about even the Wide Atlantic Way, the figures will show us from Galway downwards. It's not Mayo, Sligo and up into Donegal that are getting the main benefit of that. So there's work to be done in terms of balance, but I think part of that is improving the tourism product, improving the market, and that's the discussions that we're having, improving the brands, trying to attract people. A lot of that is starting to deliver results, but we have a fair way to go to get up to a level playing field.
It's just helping support the airport get those extra routes. So it's attracting, if you look at the island, just if you like, that kind of north half, including some of the Republic, coming and using Belfast as the hub rather than Belfast. Dublin's so handy to access and that was one of the things they picked up. But
it's almost like a chicken and egg thing. I mean,
Yeah.
if we improve the product, if we improve the marketing, then the numbers who'll be looking to come here will mean that their companies will put on more flights and demand
There's
more.
a strand to what you're saying, Mr. Honeyford, which is that if capacity is limited in the Republic, so that our current model is largely if you're flying in, especially from long haul flights, you come to Dublin and you come north, and you want to make that journey as smooth as possible, and that's what the ETA problem creates. But if there's a capacity in airport in the Republic, then we need to think about how we can actually start to service the rest of the island as well. So so Tourism Ireland has been speaking to me in relation to that about what would need to be done. There was a report last year, you're probably aware of it, about rail connections on the island, and two of the items that came up there were about improving rail connections to the airport. So the current line is about 400 metres from Belfast International. And then the Sydenham stop is still where the old entrance to the airport used to be, about half a mile down the bypass. So there are a couple of things could be changed there, but all of those cost substantial sums of capital money. And so the executive would need to be in a position where there has sufficient funds to be able to prioritise those kinds of projects and deliver them.
Bear in mind the debate's still going on about the rail connectivity from Dublin to the airport. You know, even the amount of passengers are taken and the amount of funds available in the Dublin Exchequer, there's still that discussion about whether they need a kind of a light rail or whatever type of connection from the airport into the city.
Anything from the department to lobby for that rail link. I've been banging on about that in my own area for years. That'd be great. Listen, just finally, just the company just turned to energy. The energy support scheme was due to launch March 25 next year. I'm just checking, is that still target date still there? And then there's a consultation on smart metering for homeowners. Is there any timelines to when we'll see or targets for smart meters?
The energy support scheme, are you referring to the contracts for difference scheme?
The renewable energy support scheme. There was one announced, the 1 megawatt, or was it upwards?
Contracts for difference, right. So I think that will actually, contracts will be let in January of 2026. But we get through the process, then we have to get into the bids and assessments and that. So, but the intention is aiming for contracts being let in 2026.
2026. Smart meter?
That will follow on from the consultation exercise, which is currently underway. Now, the smart, I think we need to be quite careful about how we approach this. Smart metering has not been a massive success in some other places because of the way it's been implemented. So we need to learn all the lessons from that in the design of the scheme. I think it'll be absolutely critical we make sure we do it right.
That's totally
rather than do it quickly. So we're quite a lot of discussions inside the department with officials about how we will take that forward and what the next portion of that will be. But technology is moving. Well, again, you want to do it inside this mandate, certainly. Right. So that's certainly the aspiration, the intention. But again, we'll have to bring all the detail of this to the committee, so we can thrash that through. Because no doubt you will have, you want to make sure that some of the mistakes that we made elsewhere aren't replicated here.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. I was worried when I was last to speak that I'd have nothing left other than to ask you about the Tour de France coming there.
It's fair enough. If you want to forgo your questions, I'm happy to leave.
I mean, I was going to touch on, and I will touch on some of the things that have been already covered, particularly the relationships within the executive on stuff that covers you, and then relationships within the island on stuff, because all of the stuff that you talked about, whilst is driven within the department, whether it's skills, education, childcare, the airports, the energy, net zero, etc., particularly planning, does have some impact for your department with work that has to take place. I mean, I was struck particularly from the evidence that we have heard here from various bodies, particularly the planning is a major issue. We've had different organisations and groups on here who have raised it with different complications for the work they're doing. I mean, I was struck when Renewables NI were in, when they talked about the level of investment that takes place in the south in comparison to the level of investment. It was nearly 90-10, and I'm not saying all of that was related to planning, but a large part of it was related to planning. So, I mean, with regard to the Climate Act, the energy strategy that we're talking about, planning is something that will have a major impact on some of the executive priorities and the stuff you're doing. So, if you could maybe just elaborate a wee bit more with regard to that and its impact with some of the work that you're doing, and then also on the all-island basis. I mean, I'm also heartened to hear that there's a good level of cooperation. The all-island economy is important to you, so that requires relationships, and tourism is important, so that requires relationships. So, I mean, even going beyond working with ministers, the officials side of it, or even NGOs working side by side, all of that's very important to the work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we have said in planning, everybody recognises, and was recognised even in discussions last year among parties, that everybody brought the same issues that you're bringing, and that others here have brought, just about the bottlenecks, the hold-ups, the inconsistency, all of that, inconsistency in terms of timeframes between departments, and there actually was a proposition brought to those discussions to try and to do something about that. We want to see that. There was a resource attached to it, so we want to see that picked up and run with as quickly, and we've had dialogue with John and his team when we do joint meetings with them in relation to that. So I know it's something they're exercised about and they want to bring forward, and obviously they could give answers in terms of time frame, but there is absolutely no doubt it is holding back areas of development, but also in terms of the green infrastructure that we want to build, that it will have an impact there as well. Now, people have the right to have their view on planning and object and raise issues around planning, and that is goes without saying. But we need, in terms of the bottlenecks in the system, to be quicker, so that these things don't get dragged out for years and years. In relation to the cross-border, we have a number of departments to engage with, because the Department of Economy here is a very broad remit. So we have the straightforward economy pieces that we had a meeting with Peterborough last week. Only a few days before that, we were meeting with Eamon Ryan, online meeting, talking about issues around renewable energy, and I had a north-south meeting with Catherine Martin on Monday morning in relation to the tourism issues. We're instigating a group of the three tourism agencies, and both departments will sit down and meet on a regular basis. So it's not just a dialogue in that space, it's actually a dialogue involving Tourism NI, Fáilte and Tourism Ireland, and both sponsor departments. We progress more in relation to the marketing and the supports and the brands, and all of the issues that come in under tourism. So there is and then we also have the further and higher education sector, which had been Simon Harris, is now Patrick Donahue. We have an engagement with him. Before Simon Harris was elevated at the Taoiseach's office, we were talking about joint work on the Northwest in particular, strategies there, and a desire to meet up in that area and to have dialogue with people involved in that process. And the officials from the department are meeting on a very, very regular basis, across all of those issues. I think we've maybe 4 different areas that we engage in, and 4 different ministers, and there has been a turnover in personnel there as well. We're also interested and keen to get working with whoever comes into office in Whitehall, because that again has been a bit of a revolving door, fairly unstable over the last while, over the last number of years actually, to be quite honest, even in terms of when I was previously in office in finance, different person almost every time you went over to do a meeting. So we want to build up those relationships as well, because there's a close working relationship needed there with the incoming government in Whitehall across the range of issues. And I mean, that's the best way to get shared understandings, to get things done, is to build up those connections, the continued dialogue among officials, and as regular as possible engagements, and the agencies working on these things. So in reference to David's point, we're saying when we were down, we met IDA, we met Enterprise Ireland, we have agreed then with the department that we're going on a joint mission together. So all of those things are important, because they build up collaboration and collaborative relationships, and everybody here who's in politics will know that a lot of these things work an awful lot better when you have relationships built up with the individuals involved, and from official to official then things work much more smoothly. So that is very, very strong, and it is working very well, and there are plans to strengthen and deepen that. But we also we've had a number of years of a kind of dysfunctional relationship with Whitehall, and I'm hoping, and I'm sure other executive ministers are hoping, when a new government comes into place, that we get back down to a more sustained relationship there, because there are quite a lot of issues we need to resolve with them as well, not least the finances, but across a whole range of matters as well with them.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the employment rights bill, I think everybody's going to welcome that, and we look forward to scrutinising it. When we were in the membership of the EU, some of the good practices that we currently have came through EU legislation. Is the department intent on looking at what's happening within the continent, within the EU, and trying to bring best practice here as part of that bill?
Yeah, and I mean, some of the stuff, the actual issue I brought to the Assembly yesterday was some of that had been covered by the kind of adoption of what were EU standards, and some of it may not have been. It actually probably was all covered, but in order just to be sure, those issues of leave, parental leave, paternal leave, there was 6 different issues of leave issues addressed, and some of them were carried over from EU law. So yes, there's a standard there which I think we would want to make sure that we don't drop below, and particularly when you're talking in terms of attracting an investment and those issues, people need to be sure what the standard of, and the work that we're doing in Europe to attract investment and to take advantage of the dual access issue, that we need to make sure we have proper standard for workers. So we're trying to set the highest standards that are possible to us. A lot of those will match what's currently in the EU, and the documentation that we'll be putting out for consultation next week already has a very strong input from unions side, and obviously then it will be open to consultation for everybody to bring forward ideas and suggestions. It's already pre-consultation done with business organisations as well, but it's a fairly substantial document, so the more feedback, we realise over summer is not ideal to do this, but by the same token, if we don't start the clock ticking now, we potentially run out of time at the end of the mandate, so we were keen to get it moving, and so the more input into that then the better, in terms of making sure that it's as effective as it can possibly be.
Yeah. Finally, just with regard to event tourism, so anybody out knocking doors, canvassing at the minute knows how important the Euros are to everybody, and how unimportant maybe elections are to everybody. But it is. We have had the benefit in the past, and our economy and the region has benefited from it in the past. So I know the Open is coming next year. Is there any investment? Because the first time it came, there was a substantial amount of executive investment, infrastructure, etc. What level of investment is required from within the department for next year's Open? Also, the Euros has kind of been talked to death nearly, but I think hopefully we're all agreed that we want the Euros coming here in 2028, and Casement Park built in advance of that, so that our economy and this region can benefit from all that would be good with regard to that. And then finally, when are you bringing the Tour de France to Ireland?
I knew there was a cycling sting in the tail there somewhere. Yeah, clearly we do benefit, and we benefited from the Giro and the Tour section that was here. It not only brings visitors, but it also brings a focus of attention. It brings international exposure. People are looking at it. They're looking at particularly the bicycle races, going through the scenery that we have, past the towns and villages that we have, and that increases that interest in relation to that. We have the Irish Open Golf here in this summer in Newcastle. We have the Open then next year back in Portrush. There already is investment in that. We have invested money this year in terms of the prep work and the promotional work, and that will, I don't know what the exact figures are for next year, but I imagine that will increase next year.
It's a bit less than $1 million. Actually, it's because it's in July. The amount of money spent next year is less than this year.
Oh yeah, because the next financial year.
But yeah, we are.
We have several million into it this year, just to assist with the preparation work for that, and that brings a focus. And then you have in a few years' time the Ryder Cup's going to be in Adare, and what that does is bring a kind of golfing focus to the whole island. When I met with tour operators in the States, they were saying that they basically think there's only 2 golf courses in the north, Newcastle and Portrush. They don't realise there's a whole network of great golf courses, links ones and that. So it brings a greater understanding, and that is a very lucrative set of tourists to get visiting very regularly. They think there's only 3 or 4 in the south as well, you know, some of the key ones down there too. So there has to be a greater understanding of what's available. So there is investment already going on in that. As I say, there will be some next year, but that will be right in the mouth of it, so may not be just as much. But we are putting on, we're working very closely, obviously, with the organisers to make sure it's the best event. It was a huge event the last time it was here. We want to make it even better and learn whatever lessons were from that. In terms of the Euros, absolutely, you can just see that. You can see it every night on your TV screen, the impact that's having. And again, it is about the immediate visitors, but it's also about the exposure. It's also about the television exposure and then the legacy of that going forward. So from us, the ability to host the Euros here, and there is only one facility that has any remote possibility of doing that, the ability to host the Euros here, to get casement done, to be able to do that, will bring enormous economic benefit to the whole region, not just to Belfast, but the whole region. It also leaves that legacy of continued tourism interest, but there will be a legacy for soccer, because there will be a legacy funding attract that, and legacy for sport in general, which I think will be very, very beneficial. And I'm sure from a cycling perspective, you can see the legacy even that those events had in terms of an interest growing in the sport. That's good for society, it's good for our health, it's good for the community generally. So, I mean, these things are all win-win. We just need to get them up and going and get them working properly.
John, thank you. Thanks.
Perfect. And just one final thing from me, Minister, in relation to RHI. Is the department now content that the business case is as good as it needs to be? So just with my finance hat on, I've seen there's ongoing correspondence between the Department for Finance and the Department for the Economy seeking additional information in relation to the business case. Are we now confident that the business case is done, dusted for the preferred option, and the executive is now ready to take a decision?
Well, there are 2 business cases.
Yeah.
So the first one is in relation to the revised tariff, which is the more important and more immediate one. And the business case for the closure will be predicated on the revised tariff. So the business case for the revised tariff is very close to completion. Now, the Department of Finance had been concerned about what the ongoing impact would be from the Ofgem notification to us, and then wanted to know what the executive's position in the future of the scheme was whenever they were looking at the revised tariff business case. But now we've been able to deal with those issues, and hopefully we'll get all the approvals and the agreements in place to allow us to revise that tariff from the autumn before the winter period comes in. There's also a window in terms of the system's operation, which means that's the optimum time to do it. The business case for the closure of the scheme, if that's what the executive decides, it depends on a decision taken at the executive. And as the Minister has said, he's been trying to take that paper to the executive to secure an agreement on that for a number of weeks now. Once we get the executive's direction on the way forward for the scheme politically, then we will be able to work up the options, and they will, broadly speaking, be around how the closure will look in practice and how it will work in operation.
Perfect. Gentlemen, you've both been very generous with your time, so thank you both very much indeed. And I wish you a good summer, and we'll see you when we come back in the new term. Thank you both very much indeed.
Yeah. In relation to the Magee particulars, we will follow up and write into the committee.
We may need to correct the numbers that we said to you earlier, Mr. McLaughlin, so around the position for the current year, and actually, because I think I misunderstood what the figures were previously.
Higher or lower? We'll play a game now.
The precise
Higher.
Right, precise numbers still be worked out. It'll be marginally above 500 extra places, but it's the interaction between that and the MASM cap from the previous year,
yes.
Because I had got myself confused with the previous briefing, which had seen where we weren't going to actually do anything about that MASM cap breach, where normally there's a process.
We built into this.
Yeah,
right.
And then there are other numbers as well, and it's a part of a trajectory towards taking us up to 1,000 additional places within 2 years. So we need to clarify the precision of that, because I don't think what I actually said.
I think it's around about 150 from the previous.
Yeah.
But also then to give you the spread across the courses as to where the positions are going to be.
Yeah, so just I wouldn't want to go away with the wrong impression, having said something that wouldn't entirely correct.
You'll be leading on Radio Foil anyway. Okay. So don't disappoint.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it.
I'll see you later.
Yes, of course. Just take a minute. Just as well, we'll try and get Gary back.
I've just missed our manifesto launch.
Oh, you're missing your manifesto?
We'll be,
No quorum.
we'll be quick. We're waiting for now Mr. Honeyford to come back. We'd lost Gary for a second there.
Can they agree follow-up actions, or is that what's happening?
Yeah.
I was saying, is it 5? We need 5.
We need
after
5.
stay.
We need 5 to agree. Cover-up actions. Just waiting for Mr. Honeyford to return. Sorry about the technology, members. That was bad because he was in mid-sentence when it cut him off. So.
Do you want to speak to the forward work programme then, Peter, and then we can get that out of the way?
Okay. Okay, we have 4. So forward work programme is as you can see at page 207. Just what it is, members. The next meeting, next scheduled meeting, is 4th September. But the clerking department in the assembly has decided they're going to train me that day. So you'll be glad to know I'm going to be trained. So that'll be good going forward. So could we possibly change that to the 5th of September? So that's a Thursday. I don't think any other committees are meeting, possibly agriculture, but nobody.
Democratic Scrutiny Committee.
It's a meeting?
That meets on a Thursday morning.
It does. It sure does. Right. No, so can't do that then.
Yep.
No, so it'll have to stick with the 4th,
Perfect.
and I will have to go untrained. So, so we'll you just have to take your chances.
I'm happy. I mean, I'm only one. I think there's only. Is there only one of us?
Saoirse's on it too.
No, Saoirse
No,
came off it,
Jonathan,
and Jonathan came off it.
Okay.
So, like, I mean, I'm happy enough if everybody else is. If you want to move it, I can miss the. I mean, we may not have. I mean, we meet when we have to, when we're notified.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we're not meeting this Thursday or next Thursday. We will be meeting. There's a good chance we will have to meet, but that's not definite. And I mean, I'm only one, so if you really needed to change it,
If we go on the 5th, and I'll have a nice chat with Marie and see maybe if you might meet in the afternoon.
okay.
Do you think that would play? So you could have us in the morning and then go off to Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny
Obviously,
Committee.
and that would require agreement from everybody else on the
Indeed.
committee.
Well, yeah. But you're not meeting until then, but you might be able to agree that. I'll see what I can do. So if members are content to leave it in my hands, we'll probably it will probably be the 5th then, which is the Thursday, subject to agreement. So that will be our next scheduled meeting. Will be the 5th. We'll be in Sony. They're going to do a wee tour. They're going to talk to you about energy stuff. It's not very far from here. And then we'll do a little strategic planning session. Very short meeting, just looking at correspondence.
Okay.
Members are content?
Yep, perfect, agreed. Okay, just follow-up actions then. Firstly, if we as a committee request the membership of the Tourism Partnership Board, details of the submission to the Transformation Board. I believe the Minister agreed to Sinead's request in relation to Work in Ireland survey, similar to taking place here in Northern Ireland, or was I wrong?
Sorry?
You asked the Minister in relation to the survey, was that the similar one to the one Work in Ireland?
Working in Ireland, yeah.
I believe he committed to doing that.
He did.
Maybe we may wish to ask when that will begin.
Okay.
I give a written question in regarding it as well. He
Okay.
said his answer was just one word, yes.
Okay.
So
And then also clarification in relation to additional student numbers at Magee this September, and also how that spreads across courses.
just
We didn't ask before.
Yep.
So additionally, members, do you want to ask for some information on their plans in respect of smart metering?
That was a public consultation.
Yeah, I
That's
said
why I
that
was
with
just
the
trying to get
consultation
how
stuff.
quickly they were
Yeah.
leaving with it. All of us.
Is it the case also, Chair, that the committee wishes to indicate its support for the funding of Skill Up? Because I'm sort of sensing there that that's going to happen.
yeah.
And do you also, maybe I'm pushing it here, around the transformation proposals, because what they were increase of apprenticeships in the public sector, post-1910 provision, and in the longer term, digitisation of insolvency. Do you want to indicate your support for those? Because they feel uncontroversial.
Yeah.
Sorry, on Sinead.
He also, well, he also indicated about the 11 point whatever million in terms of skills. He talked about the childcare as well, about investing in training.
Okay, so you're
So
looking
just
for indicating support then for
Yeah.
additional childcare training, yes.
Okay, everyone's content. We'll then move to item 7, Utility Regulator Support for Decarbonisation Preparation Bill. Are members content to note the written paper pending an oral briefing? Is that agreed?
Agreed. Sorry, Chair. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Just for a cut across, in terms of the ministerial briefing, forgive me for this. Got our members also just content to note the correspondence that we received. It's in tabled items at page 3, that was about RHI, page 6, June monitoring, and page 8, which is about utility regulator virus. It's just the June monitoring one. There's a legal requirement on the department to share this stuff with us, and they're quite keen that we recorded it on the minutes.
Yes,
We
no,
did indeed
agreed.
note it. Didn't say very much, but that's agreed. Sorry,
Agreed.
Chair.
Yeah, no problem. We then move to correspondence members. If members are content to dispose of correspondence in line with the suggestion in the index, with a few exceptions, are members agreed with that? Then move to item 7, which is members are asked to consider further invitation from Regen Waste. Are members content that rather than us visiting Newry, we invite them to our committee? Yep, that's agreed. Item 8, members, is for noting. Are members content with that?
Yep.
Item 9, are members content to note correspondence from the Department for Education and forward to the Education Committee? That's agreed. Item 10 is again for noting correspondence. Are members content with that?
So members, sorry, beg your pardon, Chair, we're in tabled items now. So we're now at item 10, so that's actually page 47 of tabled items, which is about correspondence from the Committee for Education. Sorry.
Yep.
So,
My fault. Item 11 in tabled items, members are asked to note a copy of correspondence from the Committee for Education to the Department for the Economy in respect of post-send provision. Members content to note. Thank you. Item 12 in tabled item, members are asked to note a copy of the correspondence from the Minister for Education in relation to interdepartmental cooperation in relation to the childcare strategy. Are we content to note, members?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 13 in table pack, members are asked to note correspondence from the CMA indicates that it does not have information in respect of premium costs by jurisdiction. Is the committee content to write to the CMA and FCA seeking their assurance that competition is working appropriately in respect of motor insurance in Northern Ireland? Thank you. Item 14, members are asked to consider correspondence from Disability Action. Are members content to write to the department seeking its commentary on Disability Action's views? Thank you. And then we move to the forward work plan, which is agreed. And then any other business, members? No. If not, can I wish you all a very enjoyable summer and look forward to seeing you all in September.
Committee Room 30, Sound.